Hello everyone, and welcome to the first video on my new YouTube channel about Omnis Studio. I'm hoping to do some videos on this YouTube channel teaching about this wonderful language that I've been working in for the last 20 years or so. I sort of wanted to do this first video to redo the tutorial series that I did a couple of years ago on my blog, just to get into things. So well, let's just get started, and hopefully you guys will enjoy this and find it useful. First of all, you'll see that I am in Studio 8.1. That's the latest version of Omnis Studio. It's actually still in beta at the moment, but I'm getting some mods with it, just trying some things out, and I figured might as well use it. For those people who are older versions of Omnis Studio, for the purpose of this video and these the things that we'll be discussing today, it doesn't really matter which version of Omnis Studio you are in. Most of the stuff will work from Studio 4 onwards. I will be using SQLite, which I believe was introduced in Omnis Studio 5. But the techniques that we're going to be talking about, connecting to a database, work the same in Studio 4, but then with, say, Postgres or Frontbase or Microsoft SQL Server or any of the other servers that you can connect to with Omnis Studio. So let's get started and try to work our way through it. All right, we need to start with creating a new library. Just creating a blank library. Just placing it on the desktop for now. Nice and easy. Calling it SQLite. This is not going to be a beginner's tutorial, by the way. I'm going to assume that you guys know at least the basics around Omnis and are just interested in connecting to a SQL database. And I'm using SQLite because it's a nice little standalone database engine. You don't need to install any server software for this. You can just use it right off the bat. And you know, all the things that I'll be showing you today will be working pretty much exactly the same with any other database software out there that Omnis can communicate to. I like to put my my classes in folders just to organize them a little bit better. So I'm going to call that folder database classes, and the first thing that I'll do is I will create a new class, a new object class called SQLite. Now, Omnis works with this concept called data access modules, which are classes in Omnis itself that allow you to connect to databases. You can use these classes straight away. You don't actually need to create an object like I'm doing right now, but I prefer this this way, and hopefully after the end of this video you'll understand the benefits. So I'm going to set the superclass to the SQLite session. There we go. And when I open this in the method editor by double-clicking, you'll see that all the methods for this class, they're immediately visible, which is kind of nice. Omnis always adds these three methods by default. I don't need them right now, so I'm going to get rid of them. The method that is interesting for us right now is this $logon method, which will try to connect to an SQLite server or database. We're going to be doing some more with this, and this is one of the reasons why I like to subclass this, because it allows us to override these methods and add additional logic in here that we need for whatever reason we may have in this. We're not going to do that just yet, but we are going to come back to that. The other thing to note is that for all the DAMs, these four parameters will always be there. We'll have a host name, which is the either the DNS entry of a database or the IP address of a database server, or in the case of a file-based database like SQLite, it will be the path to the database file that we will be using. The second parameter is the username. Now, this is where it gets interesting. Obviously, the password and username, these two parameters sort of go hand in hand. Most databases have user authentication built in, and obviously when you connect to those databases, you will have to specify username and password. Now, SQLite doesn't actually have that construct. You can just connect to the SQLite database, and you can use it. There's no login procedure there. We will have to build that ourselves if that is something that we need. You may not need it if you do a standalone application where user authentication isn't important at all. You just want to have a nice little desktop application that stores some data. You would just connect to that database and use it for that storage purpose. But we're going to assume in this video that we're actually going to need a proper login process, and we will eventually be building a user and password authentication solution for SQLite, which is one step that you will not need if you would be using any of the other database systems. The last parameter that is always here is this thing called session name. Now I don't use this one very often. This was interesting in the early days of when these new DAMs were introduced, because it would allow you to use the connection that you make from inside the Studio browser. So for instance, the SQL browser here would give you access to the sessions that you have opened. But like I said, I don't use that very often anymore, so I generally leave that blank. When you leave it blank, it actually generates a unique session name in the background, and that is important if you are in a situation where you would be connecting to multiple databases. If you're in that situation and you would be setting the session name, if you don't make sure that session name is unique, you will get into trouble. So I tend to leave that one empty. We've got our object. We're not going to overwrite this method just yet, but we do need to create a window that allows a user to enter these details and connect to the database. So that's the next step. So we're going to create a new window class, and we're going to call that wlogon, and we're going to go and edit that. Now, I tend to put everything nicely on a grid. I'm a little bit crazy in that way, but it's a little overkill for this video. The first thing that we need to do, and I just double-click on the window to get back into the method editor, is we need to create some variables that the user can use to enter our login information. So, remembering from our logon function, we need a logon name. These sizes aren't really important at the moment, but we need a password, we need our host name, and there we go. Those three are what we need right from the get-go. So let's put some fields on our window so that the user can actually enter those. So we're going to start with our username. And again, this is all a bit overkill, but I kind of like making these things look alright. And an entry field. That's slightly bigger. Our username. And I like to call my fields by the same name as the variable that gets shown in that field. Okay, now it's just a personal preference. So let's duplicate that. That's going to be our password in a minute. That's going to be our host name. Which is a bit misleading, as I said before. That makes a lot of sense, that name for a database that's hosted somewhere, but because right now we're going to put a file name in here, it's a bit of a misleading name, but that's fine for now. So I like to put the horizontal scroll property true for this one. It just allows you to put text in here that's bigger than the field. So that's going to be the password. And here's another nice little trick that Omnis has, is we have got this little field called, this property called password char. So whatever we put in here will be used to display whatever text is in here. So that nicely hides the password from any onlookers. I'm not quite sure if it stops you from copying it out though. Yeah. That's a topic for another day, maybe, to experiment with that. And obviously we need a nice little button to allow the user to press when you want to log on. So there we go. So that is our window very quickly put together. Now I can press Apple T or Control T on Windows to quickly open that window and type some things in. but obviously it doesn't do much yet. Now, one of the things that I want to do at this point in time, just to make our lives easier in testing, this is probably not something that you would do in production, or you might be getting this from some settings file or something like that. But we're going to put our host name to something default. Just cheating for a minute and having a look at what I did before. So I need a couple of variables here just to temporarily store some stuff into. Because I'm going to use this function in this library called filelooks called split path name. There we go. That's the one. Now this is what I really like about Omnis Studio 8 is this code completion that you can see below, that you know exactly what you need to type in. Now the path that I'm going to split is the path to the library that we currently have open, because I want to have access to where our library is. And from that, we're going to default our host name to that. So when I now open my window, you will see that it finds the location of our library. I use the drive and path to build this user's Basilei desktop path, and our SQLite DB, which will be our SQLite database. Finally, we need to make sure that something happens when the user presses our logon button. So what we're going to be doing here is calling, oh, I forgot something very important. I need a variable for our session first. Okay, now this is a discussion on itself. Right now, I am creating the object as a task variable, which means that the moment that my application starts, this variable will be instantiated, and it will be instantiated from the class SQLite, which is our database connection object. And this makes this globally available. Now, for simple tutorial applications like this, and actually, for a lot of standard applications where you're connecting to a single database, this suffices. This is I know that a lot of people sort of hate on globals, but I think this is actually one of the situations where a global variable actually applies. Obviously, if you are in a situation where you would be connected to multiple databases, or you would be using different database connections for whatever reason, then this is probably not the way that you want to go. You probably want to create the variables locally or manage them in some other way. But for the intents and purposes for this tutorial, and I think for the purpose of most simple client-server applications that are out there, there really is no point to jump through hoops to do anything else than just create a global variable for this. So once we got our variable, and like I said, that will be automatically instantiated the moment that our application starts. So we've got access to it already. We can call the login function on that variable. So like I said, I'm just going to be using the 3 parameters here. I'm going to leave the session name empty. And what I simply want to do for now is, if we successfully connect, we're going to say successfully connected. And if we fail, we're going to give an error message. Now, here is actually a nice, actually 2 properties that we want to report at this point in time. One is error text. I'm going to skip the error code for now, but because the error text is really what we're interested in. This is the error that Omnis will have internally, which usually is something like can't find something, or can't connect to something, or whatever. But there's a second one, which is native error text. which is actually the error that will be returned by our database itself. So I tend to report both of those. This one is actually 9 out of 10 times the more usable one. This one sometimes is very important, especially if things go wrong very early on before the database engine actually comes into play. So let's try that. Like I said, the username and password right now, we have the fields, but they don't actually do anything at this point in time. And, oh no, a connection could not be established. Unable to open database file. Well, that actually kind of makes sense because we just specified this path. We actually don't have this file. Obviously, I'm trying to connect right now to an SQL database that does not exist. Luckily, we can solve that quite easily. Obviously, if you're expecting a database to actually exist, that's exactly the error that you want. But in our case, we want to create that database in the situation that we don't have the file. And we're actually going to do that by overriding our logon function. So when I looked up the logon function, I right-clicked on it, and I said override. It'll give us this nice little comment at the top which reminds us what the parameters are that Omnis expects. So I'm going to copy those, because we still need those parameters. I'm going to make that a bit larger, because paths are usually a bit larger than that. There we go. And we're just going to put the code in here already to make sure that our original logon function gets called. And note that I am actually leaving out, oops, I actually named that one wrong, I really admit. That's a nice little dialogue. I didn't actually know we had that one. That's new. Alright, that automatically renames here. Notice that I've left the session name out of this. If you find a use for it, if you actually find that useful, then by all means add it in. I'm leaving it out because we will eventually be adding another parameter here in the not-so-distant future. So if we successfully log on, we just return true. I could just do a quit method $inherited log on here. I like to write it out like this so that I can actually do some more logic if we successfully log on, or do some more logic like maybe logging this error if it goes wrong. But for this tutorial, I'm going to leave that empty, but I like to put that structure in place already. The thing that we need, and I just need to cheat for me and have a look at my notes. There. What we need is a very simple thing. Oops. And that is, before we connect, set this property on our object to true. Now this property tells Omnis to create the database file if it doesn't exist, and basically creates an empty database for us. Let's open up our window again, and this time we get a yes, successfully connected message. And if I go back here, I should actually be able to see. So that one. So this one. Okay. There we go. There we go. We should see that well, no error has been reported. Our host name is set to SQLite DB, so we have successfully connected to this database, even though it's very, very empty. Okay. So obviously we don't want our user to Apple T here, and we don't want the user to sort of press a button and get an OK message, and that's all that's going to happen. So let's clean this up a little bit more and make sure, first of all, that our window opens whenever our application opens. So I'm going into our startup task, which is basically the global container for our global states. Probably not the best way to describe it. For now, that we'll have to do. And this class has got a construct and a destruct. The construct is run when obviously the application opens, and the destruct runs, basically the last thing that runs right before the Omnis application closes. So we're going to very simply say, let's find our logon window and say, open that up at the center of the screen. So I can mimic starting our application by closing our task and reopening our task. And there you go. Our logon window comes up right away, and we can put in our username and password, and we can press log on. Obviously, after you press log on, you would set up your whole application. And you could put that code underneath the logon button. What I prefer doing, because I think it is a thing that our task is really responsible for, is we create our method here, finish logon. And do I still have my window open here? Probably not. And just for now, I'm going to move our message here. And what I'm going to do here in our logon window is I'm going to call into the current task, and I'm going to call that finish logon method, and then actually, no, let's just do it's closed. I'll explore the difference between those two methods later, but for now, we're going to, when we successfully log on, we are going to call the finish logon method in our task, startup task, and then we're going to close our logon window. So let's try that again. Close our startup task, reopen our startup task, log in. So, yep, we're successfully connected. And after I press the OK button, my window is gone. It is closed. So, the next step after this is actually, setting up our application. But I think that's enough for the video for today. I think that's going to be for a part 2. So yeah, that's basically our starting point. We have our database connection object. We have a very quick window that allows us to fill in our logon details. A nice logon button that actually performs the logon procedure. Some code that we've put in our login object or in our database object that will make sure that our file gets created. And the beginnings of the rest of our application. So yeah, I hope you guys liked this first video, and see you soon for the next one.